As little girls and boys, we look up at the glowing angel that gave us life with love and adoration. But for too many, this is not a happy reality. For many, the woman holding us is a true monster. These are their nightmares. Delve deep as we unravel the turbulent bonds between mother and child. You are listening to Monsters and Mothers with your host, Betty Wild.
Contaminated crime scenes, a woman with an attitude, and a little girl dead. Patsy Ramsey, Dissecting the Truth. What's up, everybody? This is Betty Wild, and thank you for joining me today on Monsters and Mothers. This case was sensational. Every newsstand was covered with the Ramseys' case. It was a real live mystery that the masses could sink their teeth in. A real whodunit. Years would go by and no one was closer to the truth, but we all knew who to point the finger at. Have you ever met a woman so cunning that she could walk into a room with a smoking gun, a body, and talk her way out of the floodlights of accusations? Well, enter Patsy Ramsey. It was as though Martha Stewart herself was under fire. For those that don't know the story, JonBenet was a 6-year-old beauty queen that won the hearts of judges and fans worldwide. Pounds of blonde, beautiful hair, makeup of a fashion model, a smile that melted your heart. JonBenet was a rising star. On the morning after Christmas, JonBenet was not in her room, and a ransom note was left threatening the family. Her brother Burke, who was 9 at the time, her father JonBenet, whom she was named after, and Patsy were the last to see little JonBenet alive. Detective Linda Arndt arrived first at the scene, and in her interview, which was extremely interesting, it kind of gave me a chill. She noticed that there was something very unusual about the behavior of John and Patsy. They were very cordial, she says, as though they were just greeting you. They were not upset or crying. And she noticed that both John and Patsy were in separate rooms for most of the morning. When she stumbled upon John in the kitchen, she said he just stood there reading his mail as though nothing really terrible had happened. Also, because in the ransom note, it says that at 10 a.m. that they should all expect a call. And she said that 10 a.m. came and went, and nobody there said, oh my God, we have to wait, or how come they haven't called, or it's after 10, now what do we do? It just went on. And she really put that in the back of her mind to note for later. It would be said that she did screw up very badly with the case, but from what it seems like, that when she did call for backup, no one showed up for a very long time, and she was forced to do this all on her own. So in my opinion, I think she did a great job considering what she was presented. And at one point, she did send John off into the other rooms to look for Patsy, which was a huge mistake because he did find the body. And when she saw him, she asked him immediately to put the body down. And she said that when they knelt down towards each other, she got this gut feeling that made her sick. And she said for 1 second, she looked into John's eyes and she remembers clutching her gun and counting that she had 18 bullets, and she wasn't sure that by the time her backup arrived that anybody in the house would be alive, because she saw the look in John's eyes, and in that moment she knew that all her thoughts that something wasn't right was true, and she really believed that he knew exactly what happened. The Ramseys were a prominent family, and local enforcement did not want to rustle those feathers. Known for their high society status and elaborate ways, the family enjoyed the spotlight. Patsy was herself a former beauty queen. But it wasn't long before the police thought that this whole crime scene seemed very much staged, and that the ransom note was nothing more than a joke. But try telling that to Patsy Ramsey. Have you seen the movie The Devil Wears Prada? There's actually an interview of her shaking her head with the detectives, and she's sitting there, and she's shaking her head, saying, "I don't care what you think you have. You're barking up the wrong tree. I didn't do it." It was as though they had to get her approval to accuse her. So we'll stop right here because Patsy didn't do it. That's why she was so confident when she was asked many times. But she does know who did. Here you have a high society mom who was known to be lavish, and the woman with all eyes on her and her family. She was Miss Spotlight, but Miss Spotlight had something most of us have. Children whom we would do anything to protect, even if what they did was incomprehensible. For a family like the Ramseys, one thing is certain. What happens in that family stays in that family, and not one person could step out of line and make that family look bad. I mean, she already lost the Miss America pageant in 1978, which was rumored to have disappointed Patsy's mother very much. What would her mother think of her now if she had brought down the family name with any truth to what people were suggesting went on in their house the morning after Christmas? No, that would never do. Not now, not ever. Patsy had a crown to uphold, and her little girl's death was not going to rain down on her. Can you tell me which little piggy did she cover up for? Was it the father? No. He was clueless and fearful of Patsy to ever be that kind of man. Was it little Burke, who was 9 and frustrated and fed up with the attention his sister was constantly receiving? Or was it more than that? Was Burke broken? Was he not your average all-American cookie-cutter, made-for-TV boy, not built of everything nice? My guess is Burke was a mini monster percolating behind the scenes. A child that went too far with playing and teasing till it hurt, and he killed his woman-like sister, tied her up, and played with her. "What have you done?" I could only imagine Patsy saying to him. Now, her 911 call was very interesting. For me, I have this ear for bullshit. I do. It's a gift. And a curse. We let our kids get away with murder. No pun intended there. But how many of you listening can relate? What would you do if an accident in your home like this occurred? Would you feed your child to the wolves? So let's get through Patsy's 911 call, because it's fascinating. The very first words out of Patsy's mouth is, "There's been a kidnapping." Like she's what? Come on, you're saying it to yourself. Like she's on stage. Yes, this isn't a horror flick, Patsy. Or is it? Let's take a mom who genuinely doesn't know what happened to her child, and someone came into your house and took your daughter. You'd probably say, "She's not here. You have to come now. There's a ransom note. Can you send someone fast, please?" It's okay, Patsy. We all screw up when we're lying. We screw up more when we are covering something that wasn't premeditated. You had seconds to think, are you guilty? Would I have done the same thing? Probably. It would have been hard to live with it, but it's nobody's business what goes on in our homes, right? But as much as we want to protect our children, we still have to let them deal with their actions through your love and support. The family's privacy was raped by the media. That probably stunted her from coming forward with the truth. What would the world think of her if they knew that maybe their son was a monster? Now, I don't know. There's no evidence that points to Burke. This is just my point of view. In the 911 call, Patsy thinks she hung up. So at the very end, you can hear that she's still talking and that there's a third person in the room, which experts say was Burke asking, what did they say? Well, for one, they say that their son is asleep the whole time during this investigation, but yet we still hear him on the telephone, wide awake. Now, when Burke asks, what did they say? Usually a child asks that when they know they're about to get in trouble for doing something. All the interviews of the family became primetime TV. We were all detectives looking for the slightest slip-up, from Patsy's drugged-out interview to Burke's sinister smiles. Were we wrong? Was it Santa Claus? So many people had come forward in an attempt to be in the spotlight, trying to convince the world that they were responsible for JonBenet's death, and all fell flat. Even up to the very end. And I actually just read in the news that the photographer that photographed JonBenet has been arrested. And this is like years later. And this is actually recent in the news that he had 16 counts of child pornography. So I wonder if they're going to test the DNA and see if there's a match, because all the DNA that was found on JonBenet's clothing, there was never a match found, which ruled out the entire family. So for me, all these years, I honestly believe that she planted some DNA of some man. And really, would that be that hard to do? A story with so many secrets. On December 26, 1996, John was first up, the father. They were going to take a flight, and their private plane was waiting for them, all ready to go. They were going to have their second Christmas with their other children. Getting ready early, and the morning after Christmas, Patsy claims that she walked down the stairs and saw a ransom note that was addressed to John. He hears Patsy screaming from the other room, which I believe he really did hear her screaming. But why would anyone leave a ransom note if the body was still in the house? The ransom note was written on Patsy's pad, according to the detectives, and someone had started on a different page because there was an impression left, the ransom note. So it looked like there were several attempts made before getting it right. But when would they have time to do this? This is what the ransom note said. Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We do respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She's safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery for the money and hence earlier delivery pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instruction will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny, as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You're not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now, John. Victory. And it was signed SBTC. What many found very curious, after also this insane letter, this was like probably the longest ransom note probably any of the detectives in their entire history. If you combine all the detectives in all the ransom notes, this is probably the only 3-page ransom note. And in a little bit, we're going to go over the details of this ransom note. What a lot of people found really interesting, because the Ramseys say that they all went to bed and woke up, but everyone was still in their clothes from the night before, and none of the beds had been slept in, which means that whatever happened late at night. And what I can't understand, and I couldn't find, was the time of death, and if the wounds were happened post-mortem. So if anybody knows that, I'm curious if you can find that information out for me. So now when they found the body, there was a garrote that was fastened around JonBenet's neck. And this, they say, was made from one of Patsy's paintbrushes. It seems odd that whoever broke in to do this would go all the way to Patsy's art room and then come back and do this. It would have to be somebody whose DNA would be there, or their hair would be over there. If they had spent enough time there, it would have to be someone who they knew. And who else but the people in the house. So another curious thing, during the interviews, John doesn't cry at all. I mean, this is recently, like, news. Not recent news, but like this is something that just happened to them. And the father is like completely dry. He's watching on, this is one of the interviews that you see on the TV, and Patsy is just crying. But the way he's looking at her, it looks as though he's watching her reactions, as though he wants to see if she's going to be able to lie. Well, it's like he's watching the performance that Patsy's doing. The reason why I say that, because if it's only been a few weeks, wouldn't the mere mention of your daughter send you into horrific, blubbering tears? I mean, even just being quiet is enough. But he wasn't. It was unusual. So here he's actually saying these words, and he's also listening to Patsy say this. Your daughter had someone come into the house, kill her, and rape her, and brutally torture her. And you are a solid block. That really only happens if you know what happened. So you know that these are the things weren't caused by a stranger. That's more painful. If something in the house had happened, there's a different mentality that happens when you're going through this. So that's my take on that. Now, other than the jealous brother theory that his sister looked like a woman close to him, he's going through puberty, he's angry, he's not getting attention. But we also know that JonBenet had bedwetting problems. It's always a red flag when a child who is completely capable of doing all these pageants, and you can tell that she's intelligent. For her age, she's very mature. I mean, to look at her, you would think that she was 16. So if this is still happening to a child of her age, which is 6, and they're still bedwetting, it's a clear indicator that there is abuse happening. A lot of people don't want to face that, but they really need to dig or scratch. Something happened to that child that consistently caused her to wet her bed. So the other angle that people were going with was, did Patsy just get frustrated that her perfect child wasn't perfect and that she was changing the mattress, changing the bed over and over? Did she just blow up and attack her own daughter? Would be the other theory. So many lies. I am curious also is, how did Burke's and JonBenet's fingerprints wind up on the bowl of pineapple? Now, in the interrogation, they had said that when they got home, they put the kids straight to bed. And that was the last time they saw them. But in the autopsy, JonBenet had recently eaten pineapples, and on the counter was pineapples. And you could ask away, but Patsy said no, she did not feed that to them. John says no, and even Burke says no. He shrugs his shoulders, he doesn't know what happened. But of course, evidence doesn't lie. She obviously ate it. So did it happen when she snuck out to eat? Somebody had to give her that bowl. And I don't think an intruder would go into the refrigerator, get a bowl, and watch her eat it, and then create this whole massacre. So a lot of what is happening and being said, nobody's fessing up to. More than 1,500 pieces of evidence had been processed, and more than 200 DNA samples were analyzed. People had received more than 20,000 letters, tips, emails, and more than 1,000 people have been interviewed. But the ransom note received its own fame. And also, while I was absorbed in this case, in 1998 was when I had found out about it. This was actually right after the Darlie Routier case, which I did, if you want to hear that case. It's one of my favorite cases. But the ransom note, it received its own fame. And also why I was so absorbed in this case. This was back in 98 when I first heard of the case. Also the time that I had heard of the Darlie Routier case, a case I also covered in my podcast. Now, I was studying then forensics and handwriting analysis. When the case first surfaced, I dissected it, and 3 things came to mind. I had learned different techniques with handwriting analysis, and so you learn a lot about a person's personality. Certain things, though, stood out to me that you never hear actually in the news, and that's 3 things. It's obvious that a woman wrote it. Men are to the point, and only a woman would actually write a 3-page letter in such detail. A man doesn't think that way. A woman is more like a little hen and a chicken. They just chatter, 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 chatter. And you can tell right off the bat that a woman wrote this, so that is one of the things that was clear to me. Number 2, the handwriting has a slight quiver to it. And you can see it a lot in the first paragraph. When you see a quiver like that, it's an indicator that the person who wrote this letter has a serious health condition. And what we know about Patsy was that she was actually suffering from ovarian cancer. And I think she also had gone into remission already. So you can, in handwriting, see illness. And number 3, there are gaps in the letter. So when a person is telling the truth, they're often asked to write a statement out. You look for things like lies. And a lie happens when you don't know what really happened, or you're about to say something that wasn't true. So your brain stops for a second, your pen lifts up, and then it goes back down. So when it's not something true, you tend to have a skip in your thought so that you can think of what you want to say, and then it's natural to put the pen back down. So there'd be a little gap right before the lie. But in the ransom note, there's so many of them, it's as though that the person was making it up as they went along. So the entire thing is a lie. There's so many large gaps. It's like someone would write something and then think, what else should we say? Okay, let's write that down. And then they would go back, so there wouldn't be an even gap in between the words. So they were just making it up as they go along. Had it been a real kidnapper, then they know what they're going to say, and they're writing it fiercely and fast, and they're trying to get it all down, they're not stopping and thinking. They pretty much, if this is happening right then and there, because it had to have happened right then and there, because it was Patsy's pad that it was written on. So an intruder would have had to come in and sit down and write 3 pages before doing what he did, because he didn't just go grab Patsy's pad and her pen and go outside for a little while and then come back in. I mean, you have to think, come on, what are the odds here? And they weren't looking good. All right, so that's my take on the ransom note. Burke Ramsey filed a $150 million defamation lawsuit against the CBS and forensic pathologist Dr. Werner Spitz. The lawsuit stems from the airing of that CBS series in which Spitz theorized that Burke Ramsey killed his sister. Spitz filed a motion for summary judgment in the case, arguing he was expressing his point of view. And that is actually allowed in the First Amendment. Nearly 20 years after the still unsolved murder of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey in Boulder, Colorado, documents produced by a 1999 grand jury have finally been unsealed. And what that means was they were never brought up on charges, the Ramseys. And all this time, we had believed that they were not indicted. But it was revealed that these documents were sealed and nobody knew what was inside them. After about 20 years, it was finally released. We were like waiting weeks to find out when it was going to happen, but we were all convinced that in that would have evidence. So what it wound up being was that they revealed that the grand jury decided to actually indict the parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, on 2 counts each of child abuse, but that the former prosecutor, District Attorney Alex Hunter, declined to sign the indictment and prosecute the Ramseys. The documents were compiled long before new DNA evidence that led to the Boulder District Attorney publicly exonerating the parents and apologizing to them in 2008. So they went through all this case. They dug up as much as they can. Years went by, and the Ramseys asked for an apology. And the Boulder police had to give it to her. They had no idea that there was information being held. And so that was, this whole thing was just a big show. It was still spectacular. Just watching any part of this case. There's so much on the internet, so much about this one case. In 2006, Patsy Ramsey dies of ovarian cancer and was buried next to JonBenet. Thank you for listening to Monsters and Mothers. I'm Betty Wild, and if you are interested in listening to more crime about moms that commit heinous acts, go ahead and listen to our other episodes. There's a few out there that will blow you away. Our last episode was Catherine Knight, the cannibal. Tune in for more. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you for listening to Monsters and Mothers. Subscribe to hear more chilling accounts of mothers who commit unspeakable horrors.